My name is Grace Holloway, and for the longest time, I believed I was adopted. It was never something I questioned growing up. It was told to me as a fact, gently at first, then with sharp dismissiveness when I started asking too many questions. I was 8 when my mother sat me down in the living room and said it with a faint smile, like she was handing me a secret treasure. "Grace, you came to us in a different way. We chose you," she said, like I was a puppy they picked out from a shelter. It wasn't until I was older, much older, that I realized how much that simple story had protected them from the truth. Because the truth wasn't that I had been adopted. The truth was far worse. I grew up in a small town just outside of Louisville, Kentucky. A town where everybody knew your business before you even finished living it. My family, the Holloways, were known as respectable people. Church-going. Neighbors nodded when they saw us in town. My father, Raymond, was a quiet man. Stern. He had hands like bricks and a stare that could pin you to the wall. My mother, Eleanor, was the opposite. Sweet on the outside, the kind of woman who brought pies to potlucks and complimented your dress even if it was hideous. But under the surface of our house, there was tension, whispers, things I wasn't supposed to hear. I remember once, around age 10, I heard my mother crying in the kitchen. She was on the phone, her back to me. Her voice cracked as she said, "We can't keep pretending. One day, she'll find out." I stood there, barefoot on the hardwood floor, holding my breath. She didn't know I was there. As the years passed, I tried to piece together who I really was. I would dig through drawers, flip through photo albums, skin faces for a trace of mine. There were no baby pictures of me. Nothing before age 3. They claimed they didn't get any from the adoption agency. And when I asked which agency, they'd change the subject. By the time I was in high school, I'd started resenting them. The love I once felt for my parents had twisted into confusion, then distrust. I always felt like an outsider. Even my younger brother Caleb, my supposed adopted sibling, fit in better than I did. He looked like them. Blonde hair, green eyes. I was darker, with deep brown curls and skin that tanned easily. It wasn't just appearance. It was the way they talked to me. Like I was delicate, breakable, like one wrong question would unravel everything. And then, everything did unravel. It was the summer after I turned 23. I'd moved back home after college to save up for grad school. The attic had become my makeshift bedroom. One humid evening, I was digging through a dusty old box looking for my high school yearbook. What I found instead was a small, locked metal tin. It was buried under old clothes, a broken lamp, and a few holiday decorations. I don't know why, but my heart started pounding the moment I touched it. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Some were in envelopes, some loose. Most were addressed to Eleanor Holloway, but they weren't from a government agency. They were all from a man named Joseph Langdon. I didn't recognize the name. The handwriting was messy, the ink faded, but the words were clear. "I miss Grace every day. I know you said it's best this way, but she's my daughter too. Daughter." I sat back, shaking, clutching the paper like it was about to burn a hole through me. I read more, each letter more desperate than the last. Joseph begging to be allowed to see me, mentioning how he was sorry for what happened that night, asking if I was okay, saying he'd keep sending money if that's what Eleanor needed. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind spiraled. I thought maybe he was my biological father. Maybe my parents had taken me in from someone they knew. Maybe this was some twisted form of guardianship. But the real truth came just a week later. I confronted my mother first. I held out the letters and said, trembling, "Who is Joseph Langdon?" Her face went pale. She didn't even try to deny it. She just said, "You shouldn't have found those." "So it's true?" I asked. "Is my real father?" She didn't answer. She looked down at her hands, her wedding ring spinning slowly on her finger. I stormed out before I could hear more lies. I needed answers. Not guilt, not evasion. I tracked down Joseph Langdon myself. It wasn't hard. He lived less than 30 miles away in a small, run-down house in Shelbyville. When I knocked on his door, I expected a monster. What I got was a tired man with eyes that looked too sad to lie. He knew who I was the moment he saw me. "Grace," he whispered. "My God, you look just like her." "Like who?" I asked. "Like your mother." And then he told me everything. He and my mother had been childhood friends. Sweethearts in high school. She got pregnant at 17, me. But Eleanor's parents were furious. They sent her away to have the baby in secret. She gave birth to me in a small town out west and came back alone. She told Joseph I had died during childbirth. But I hadn't. Instead, I was given to her older sister, who lived in another state. I stayed with her until I was 3. Then Eleanor and Raymond took me in, claiming I was adopted. But why? I asked him. 'Tis already streaming. He looked at me for a long time before answering. Because something happened when you were a baby. Something that scared her. And that's when he told me the part that broke me. One night, while Eleanor was visiting her sister, Raymond came to the house drunk. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't even supposed to know where I was. But he did. And that night, something terrible happened. He shook me. Hard. Left bruises. I don't remember it, but the neighbor reported it. Child services got involved. Eleanor made a deal with her sister to take me back under the guise of a legal adoption after clearing everything up behind closed doors. It was a cover-up. The adoption wasn't to protect me. It was to protect Raymond. I was livid. My whole life had been a lie built on abuse and betrayal. My mother had let me believe I was someone else just to keep her husband out of jail. She sacrificed truth. She sacrificed my safety. I left Joseph's house shaking, with his final words echoing behind me. I tried, Grace, I tried to get you back, but they shut me out. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours, slept in my car. I couldn't face them, not after what I knew. The next day, I packed my things. My mother tried to stop me. She stood in the doorway crying, reaching for me like I was still that little girl she could hold. "Please, Grace," she said. "We did what we thought was best." I turned to her, broken. "No, you did what was easiest, and you let me suffer for it." I walked away from the only home I ever knew, but it never really felt like home again after that. That was the beginning of the end, and it was also the beginning of the truth. I didn't talk to my family for 6 months after I left. I moved in with an old college friend, Megan, who lived 2 cities over. I barely spoke, barely ate. I'd sit in the corner of her living room, staring at the wall, trying to piece together who I really was. My identity had always felt a little loose, like it didn't quite fit, but now it was in tatters. Everything I believed was built on a lie, and that lie wasn't harmless. It had been used to protect a man who had hurt me, a man I was raised to call father. Some days I told myself I was strong for leaving. Other days, I felt like a lost child again. It was hard to explain to anyone what had happened. When I tried, their eyes widened, their voices lowered. They couldn't understand how a mother could let that happen. I didn't understand either. I started therapy. At first, I sat silently in that soft chair across from a kind-eyed woman named Dr. Patel, arms crossed, lips sealed. But eventually, my walls broke down. I talked about the attic, the letters, Joseph, the bruises I didn't remember but carried in my soul, the look in my mother's eyes that day at the door, guilt and desperation all wrapped into one. One day, Dr. Patel asked, "Do you want justice, or do you want healing?" I didn't know the answer, but a part of me wanted both. I began to research. I dug through public records, found an old case file from Child Protective Services. My name was redacted, but I knew it was me. The timeline matched. The charges had been dropped after family cooperation. It made me sick to read it. A baby girl. Signs of trauma. No follow-up after the family withdrew from the system. They got away with it. I reached out to Joseph again. He was hesitant at first, unsure whether I was truly ready to re-enter his life. But the more we talked, the more he softened. We met regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just a walk in the park. He brought a box one day with photos, pictures of him and my mom in high school, a tiny pink hat he'd kept from the hospital, and one picture of me, just a baby in someone's arms. Not Eleanor's, not Raymond's. His sister's, he said. Someone who tried to raise me until they forced him to let me go. He cried when he showed me that picture. I did too. That spring, I finally made a decision. I was going to confront the truth in the open. Not for revenge, but for closure. For myself. I wrote a letter to Eleanor. It was not filled with rage. It was quiet, clear. I told her I knew everything, that I had spoken to Joseph, that I remembered the hive-drews, the cold distance, the walls they built around me. And I told her something else, that I forgave her, but I would never come back. A month passed. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Caleb. He sounded shaken. His voice was hoarse. "Grace, Mom's in the hospital." I didn't say anything. "She had a stroke," he continued. "She asked for you." I nearly hung up. I thought about everything she had done, everything she allowed. But something in me, maybe the sliver of the little girl who used to think her mother hung the moon, needed to go. When I arrived at the hospital, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked small, frail, her face pale and sunken. When she saw me, her eyes welled up. "Grace," she whispered. I stood at the edge of the bed, arms crossed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. I said nothing. "I was weak," she went on. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself. From the shame, from the guilt. I was afraid of losing everything. I already lost Joseph, and then you. I couldn't lose more." I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You gave me away. First when I was a baby. And again every day you let me believe I was never yours." Tears streamed down her face. She tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "I forgive you," I said, "but I can't be what you want anymore." I left her room with my chest tight and my hands trembling. But I felt something lift, a weight I'd carried for years, a need for her to love me the way she never could. That was the last time I saw her. A few weeks later, she passed away. The funeral was quiet. I stood in the back. Raymond didn't even look at me. Caleb gave a brief eulogy. Friends and neighbors whispered about the distant daughter, the one who disappeared. They didn't know my story, and I didn't care to tell them, because I didn't need their sympathy. I needed peace. Months passed. I started using my real last name, Landon. Joseph helped me file for a legal name change. It was symbolic, yes, but also powerful. I was reclaiming something stolen. Joseph and I grew close. Not like a father and daughter who had years behind them, but like two people trying to rebuild something fragile and beautiful. We shared dinners, holidays, quiet afternoons reading. I started calling him Dad. He never asked me to, but one day, I just said it, and he cried. One afternoon, while we were sitting in his backyard garden, he asked if I ever thought about having kids. Maybe someday, I said, but I want to be ready. I want to do it right. He smiled. You already broke the cycle, Grace. That's more than most ever do. I took a deep breath. Let the sun hit my face. He was right. I'd been through betrayal, lies, silence, abuse wrapped in the disguise of family love. But I had survived. And more than that, I had healed. I started graduate school that fall, majoring in social work. I wanted to help others like me, kids and adults trapped in broken systems, buried under family secrets. I wasn't just Grace Holloway anymore. I was Grace Langdon, daughter of truth, of survival, of a quiet man who never stopped believing I deserved to know who I really was. My family told me I was adopted, but what they were really saying was, we're hiding something. And I found it. And in doing so, I found myself.